Welcome and thank you for joining us for the THA Fiscal 2027 Review. I am Maisha Keynes-Dumas, your host for today, and with me is economist Dr. Vanus James. Good day, Mr. James, and welcome.
How are you doing,
Dr.
Aisha?
James, welcome.
Mr. James, good, and you're doing all right. Yeah.
All right. So the Secretary for Finance and the Economy recently read a budget for $4.1 billion, which would be presented to the government of Trinidad and Tobago for review and to be a part of the national budget, which is due later on this year. Whether or not they'll get the 4.1 billion is up to the government, but for now, what the THA has done is put forward what they believe that they can use to develop Tobago's economy. What were your thoughts on the initial budget as was read?
Well, many thoughts, and maybe the single most important one is that the document is presented as if it's an entitlement by Tobago that the government in Trinidad and Tobago should fund everything we're trying to do here. Proper budgeting exercise for Tobago would treat contributions from the central government as one component. So you would go to the THA, set out a program of recurrent and development spending. You would say, we expect 80% of this to be funded by transfers from the central government. We'll find the rest of the money.
Okay.
And we will know where those are coming from. That's not the way this document is written. So it's an entitlement-dependent type
of budget. Now, Dr. James, we've done this for decades, where the pretty much 100% of what is requested is what is the THA considers under all administrations, this one, the last ones, the ones before that. The question is, what would allow for that change you speak about in terms of, instead of us going for 100%, we could start at 80%. Where would we say, give us some examples of where we could say we will fund this 20%?
The law, the way the THA Act is written, in addition to requests from the central government, there are clear provisions in the law, sections 48, 49, 50, 51, that provide the THA with a set of avenues through which it could raise resources. First of all, there are mechanisms in there for the THA to save and hold on to the savings. Any other part of government in Trinidad and Tobago that comes up with a saving has to give the money back to the consolidated fund, right? The THA Act makes an exception for the THA. So at least half of whatever you save, you could keep for development purposes.
And that was saved from the previous fiscal.
Yeah, if you run in the THA properly, you could make a request, whatever you get, you say, okay, come back to the THA, put together your spending program, and you say, we're going to save 50% of that. So you run the THA as if you're interested in development, because you will use the savings for development spending. So that's one provision that you have. The other provision has to do with building a viable economy. In the Act, I think this is the section 49 or 50, but if you build a viable economy, the more viable the economy gets, the more taxes it generates, and when you collect the taxes, that provides a whole series of channels there through which you could get from the performance of your economy components to fund further development.
So do you think the THA is not aware of this, or it is the other strategy of we'll ask for everything we want, and even if we save, we will get, that would be more on top of if they give us everything we need. Or if the government short funds us, then we already have that excess that
Well,
we
it's
can put it in.
irresponsible budgeting. You're talking about the public sector. You're talking
Okay.
about government budgeting on behalf of the public. And you can't have a secret in your back pocket and go to the nation and say, I'm doing this rather than that. You have to be transparent under the law and set up the thing so everybody could know what you're doing. It's not a secret for the Executive Council. There is another provision in the law with respect to borrowing. The law provides 2 avenues through which the THA could borrow. And it doesn't say what the purpose of the borrowing has to be. One of them, the borrowing approved by the minister, is largely for development purposes.
Okay.
But the borrowing by overdraft
Yes.
is open and
Yes.
free.
Wow.
And
Yes.
you could use that provision to set up mechanisms by which you could fund the kinds of things you really want to do for
And
development.
explain borrowing by overdraft for public who may not understand
Just
that.
like you have your bank, and you go to your bank and you say, I want to get an overdraft facility. The difference with the THA is the law doesn't tell it where to go.
Okay.
You could go wherever you want. So
Okay.
you could set up a development bank, as I've been recommending since 1997, and borrow from that.
Okay.
Borrow the overdraft from that.
Okay.
You don't need to go to a commercial bank. You don't even need to go to your credit unions. Although if I didn't have access to the development bank, I would turn the credit unions into my development bank and go make a deal with them.
Okay. And let me ask, the kind of interest generated on an overdraft, is that in line with what typical governments would pay in interest if they were borrowing outside in general?
Well, no, the overdrafts, if you're borrowing from the commercial sector,
Yeah.
would generally be more expensive than even international loans
Understood.
because of the way banks choke out your eye in in Trinidad and
Okay.
Tobago.
Yes.
But remember, the law doesn't say overdrafts from banks.
Yes.
It says overdrafts.
So you could
You could
negotiate
cook
with
up
the
your own devices
Okay.
for that purpose.
For that purpose.
And
Okay.
of course, if you are smart in government and you're talking to everybody properly in a transparent way, then what you would do is make a deal with your credit unions and let them see that you're going after building their capacity to finance development in Tobago and to kind of displace a little bit the commercial banks, none of which are owned by Tobagonians anyway.
Understood.
So these Tobago credit unions, I would use them as a linchpin of my development financing program, along with what I call a development bank.
Okay.
And in fact, I would make the credit arms of my development bank.
So I have a question for you. If THA, for want of a better word, government, decides to use that overdraft facility, what would you recommend they use it for, especially looking forward to have to pay it back?
Development.
Okay.
Yeah, I would, if the way the law is written, you can take the funding that you could get from the overdrafts and use that to really finance your development. Or you could use it for recurrent spending and use the transfers from government, the whole of it, for development. But you balance. You have to make a judgment.
But where are you going to get the money back from development in order to pay back the overdraft?
What do you mean? You build a viable economy. The economy will generate tax revenues and all of that.
Right. No, I want the public to understand.
For the public to hear.
Because
that's where.
one of the things I notice is when we talk about development, it doesn't ring a bell where there's income coming in, you know. It's just about building a big road here.
Yeah,
but if you're building a road here,
exactly.
you have no money to get back on the road. It's free thing.
Exactly.
So I wanted to make sure that people understood development didn't necessarily only mean building infrastructure where there's no return. There's building a viable economy that allows for taxes
That
to
is
come
quite
back.
so.
And okay,
That's
so I
right.
just wanted to make sure.
And not just taxes, because depending on how you do it, you could generate profits.
Profits, correct.
You know, the THA may not be notoriously competent in profit making, but if you set up Tobago properly, the communities could become the entrepreneurial arms of government. And what that would then mean is they'll be getting into profit-making businesses. And I can't think of any village that I know of in Tobago that would be unwilling
to get involved in
and
profit-making.
even have difficulty identifying what to do to make money.
Okay.
They know what to do. Remember how the fisherman programs evolved? These were all efforts by the communities to make money. You know?
Yes.
Fisherman for Charlottesville started it. Then you had one in Plymouth and so on.
Yeah.
And those fisherman opportunities made money for those who tried to do it.
Okay.
Communities would be able to expand that and turn it into a component of a tourism program and make serious money from it too. So, you know, the communities wouldn't be short of things to do. Even if you take some of these villages, like a village like Seaville, they take over the estate if the communities have the autonomy to do it properly. And they'll use it to develop agriculture. I would do that kind of thing rather than what the government is talking about with 2 mega farms, if you see my point.
And you're still talking about using the overdraft facilities for communities to benefit, to develop entrepreneurial activity.
But I would not earmark. What I would do is I would have one pool. I want to spend $6 billion. I go to the government and I say, we're looking for 4.1 billion from you, right? You hear from the government that they're going to give you 2.5. When you come back to the THA with your overall budget that you had put forward, you say, well, we're only going to raise 2.5 from the government. So we're going to expand or take from overdrafts,
you know, to cover
so much from savings. So, you know, we'll draw down on our savings. The THA actually gives Tobago room to create its own heritage and stabilization fund, you know, if you understand sections 48, 49, 50, and 51. So there is a lot of room here for Tobago to strike out on a proper investment program that could develop the economy. We never had it this good over the 127 years of our connection with Trinidad until we set up the THA. But we have not used it in the way we should. And there's no reason, you don't need to wait, you know, you could start next week. Monday, Tuesday morning, tomorrow morning, you could say, okay, I have an epiphany here, let me get started.
The next topic I wanted to bring up is the THA budget was read almost immediately after the midterm review. And in discussions, we've determined that both of them are technically similar in terms of the program emphasis. Tell us more on how you see the National Midterm Review connected to the THA budget for the next fiscal.
Well, if you look at the development priorities that are really, remember what the minister in Trinidad did was to spend a lot of time politically grandstanding, so to say. But when you read the thing at the heart, you could pin down what the minister was really saying. We're reporting on our successes. These are the things we have done to keep our promises as it relates to development. And what he identified, he said, well, all right, we're going to do the Marriott branded hotel. All right. Then what we're going to do is provide support for manufacturers and importers. So that brings the manufacturing story into the discussion. We're going to support energy sector development. These are all their development priorities. We're going to digitize government. We're going to provide flood mitigation. That's a special for Trinidad. And then we're going to do something with respect to agriculture and agro-processing and so on, crop production and all of that.
Talked about the digitization and modernization
digitization of government is part of it. And they have in mind a digitization program that has at its heart an extremely important thing, which is the Tier 4 data center. As an engineer, you would understand this. To support AI data processing. But all of that is aimed at strengthening the quality of government services that the government will deliver. Now, if you look at what the THA
Yes.
has as its...
Some of them sounded familiar. They
You're
have the
right.
Marriott Branding Hotel as
Same,
well.
yeah.
They listed creative industries,
Right.
food
Those are the
security,
same core things.
digitization and modernization of the THA.
Right.
Well, the THA government.
They don't have the manufacturing.
They don't have the
The
manufacturing.
thing with the creative industries ought to be noted. All the records we have for the country is that the creative industries have a special place.
Yes, and
in
they
our
have
development.
potential for development.
Right, but they are special, and you have to understand the sense in which they are special. The heart of the special feature is that they create increasing incomes for low-income earners.
Correct.
In their components, and they innovate. So when you take those two things together, what you have is a safety net, a viable safety net element, if you develop them, and at the same time you have to compete globally.
Yeah.
They can do intra-industry trade.
Correct.
So they're special, but they're not special in the way we treat them in the country today.
Understood. Because the way we treat them in the country today is based on events. Heritage festival.
Exactly. Carnival.
Yeah.
Event.
Island crashers.
Right.
The whole works.
There's nothing behind it that we could call industry.
There's nothing behind building it. Especially building the people. Because I think the last time we had the discussion on the data, it shows creative industries have the potential for their members to be high earners as well. And their skill sets are even higher than industries such as agriculture. Their efficiency.
Well, they're innovative.
They're innovative, yes. And that is higher on the tier as part of development outside of agriculture, even though we have to eat, outside of some of the other industries that we present, even outside of tourism.
The thing about them that the society needs to think about is that because they're innovative, they can hold their own, different to all the other industries we have. They can hold their own in trade. In the same product. So we could sell music to the world, and we could buy the world's music, and we could invest in a way that develops our music development capability so that we could win in that trade.
Correct.
That is not
That's
the
not how
way,
we use it.
no, but that's the potential that we have. Well, it's instinctively there. The point is, when you're building, when you're trying to do development, you have to understand the structural aspects of the thing. And therefore, you have to understand the whole ecosystem in the context of Tobago or Trinidad behind the capacity to exploit the creative industries. We've been doing a lot of work in the last year on that for WIPO on Trinidad and Tobago. And the record doesn't locate Tobago high on the order of capabilities, infrastructure, talent, all of the things. Taste, the desire to do it, rather than depend on government and stuff like that. When you measure Tobago against, say, Spain and places like those, we're not at the top. But because you know what to look for, you will know what to change in order to get the creative industries in Tobago underway. That's not the kind of thing that you see in the document. They're basically talking about events, as you pointed out. And
that event is not necessarily related to the creative sector. It's related to tourism in order to get people to come to the island. Well, so it's not being exploited in the way that it needs to be exploited for it to be a true industry in Tobago.
Yeah, and it's properly pointed out that you export a lot of things on the tourism platform. So you could export your products on the tourism platform. In other words, you don't mind the events.
No.
The point is that it can't simply be events. When you go to do the event, you have to have a purpose like Disney would have. That you put on this, and then you take the footage and you do film, you do video games, you do, so you build a year-round industry based on the development of your talent and your infrastructure and your trade links. And, that's not what we're doing.
Okay.
Yeah. But there is potential there.
Okay.
Still, this whole thing just looks like a kind of mirror of what
the central government
What the central
is
government
planning
is
to
doing.
focus on.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are other things that don't show up really in the way it should. So the government says, for example, that it wants to do a two-tier education system. That's the right answer. That's something we've identified for
Decades.
more than a decade now. I've been making that observation. That we've got to do it with two tracks. One is the academic track that we all know well, and the other is a skill-intensive track.
Skill-intensive
But you as an engineer would know, a skill-intensive track is not the same thing as what we just call tech voc,
Correct.
which is what they're talking about. Tech voc is just really just a set of industrial arts. Skill-intensive is about all skills in all professions.
Correct.
So engineering has an academic side, but it has a skill side.
Correct.
Medicine has an academic side, but it has a skill side.
Correct.
So when you're going to set up the school system, you have to understand that, and you have to say, one track of our education system is going to emphasize the the academic part, the logic, the inference, statistical, and the other part is about how to do it.
To get it done.
So if you want to become a lawyer, you need to be partly on the skills track,
and the academic track,
because law at the level of a practicing lawyer is a skill.
Yes.
That's not the way they're talking about.
No, they're talking about what?
Tech
Plumbing,
voc.
electrical, that kind of thing as skills.
Yeah. And the record we have data to guide them if they would only allow themselves to learn from the data. The data tells you that the tech voc intensive industries pay wages 16% below the average for other industries.
Okay.
For Trinidad and Tobago.
For Trinidad and
So
Tobago.
what is there to copy?
But then at one point in time, they used to, well, you hear them say, but I'm not sure that the data backed it up, that tech vocs like plumbing and electrical and things like that were in such great demand, they were able to...
It would be in demand.
Yes.
But the fact that it's in demand doesn't mean that's the way you develop your economy.
Okay.
You will do your tech voc in order to get your industrial arts running, to get your housing stock up and running and stuff like that. You need all that to build your roads and all of that. So none of that says tech voc is not part of skill-intensive activity.
Yeah.
It's just that if you're talking development, you need a richer view. Because what you're going to need is, say for example, if you're going to export education, you'll need highly skilled professors, some of whom are good on the academic side, but people who could do high quality statistical work, programming. These are skills. These are not academic stuff.
Yes, correct.
They are a blend, and the skill part.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a pretty good mathematician.
Yeah.
But my skills in programming are very modest.
Yes.
And so there are programmers in Tobago I know who I would go to if I really want to grapple.
And they know the programming part,
yeah,
but not necessarily the
not the mathematics.
Exactly
My point. That's the way you have to understand it.
Okay.
So the point of all of that discussion, though, is that you need a different kind of THA so that all of this information could be available to the policymakers. As it is now, the way they are organized, they can't get access to the data. So that's why they're making these kinds of what is now pretty much elementary mistakes.
Okay. All right. Hi. Thank you for staying with us. We'll take a break and come back soon.
MI4 Security Services Company is the most advanced security service in Tobago. Ask about our cash and transit service. It's safe, risk-free, reliable, and timely. We provide safe banking delivery for all business types and sizes with highly trained staff, 24/7 monitoring, coordinated emergency response, and a well-maintained fleet of armored vehicles. Contact us at 660-7723 or visit our website at www.mi4securitytt.com to sign up today.
Have you visited Tobago Channel 5's Facebook or Instagram pages lately? Well, check them out now for all the interviews and up-to-date news. Remember to like, share and follow for Tobago news and current affairs information at your fingertips.
Welcome back. Again, I have with me Dr. Vanus James, economist here in Tobago, and we are discussing the THA's fiscal package for 2027. So back to Dr. James. Again, the THA has requested, or did they take down the paperwork yet, Dr. James? After they read the budget, did they present it yet to the government?
I'm not sure.
Okay,
That's an administrative process.
The THA has presented a $4.1 billion budget. I don't know if they've publicly presented it, but I'm not sure they handed it over to Trinidad yet, right? And as part of that $4.1 billion request, they have indicated that based on the previous fiscal, that the Tobago economy has grown, and therefore a $4.1 billion package would help to continue that growth into the next fiscal year. Dr. James, do you agree?
Presumably that's what they're saying.
Yes.
Because it's not packaged in that way.
Okay.
So to be generous, you have to read it.
Yes.
As that. Otherwise, it comes over as you're entitled to the 4.1 billion.
But they're still entitled, you know, once the budget read and they multiply it by the 4.03.
Well, it's what we had in mind with the Dispute Resolution Commission was not an entitlement.
Yes.
It was funding for development.
Development in Tobago.
Because at that time, we were getting 1.2% of the budget.
Yeah.
And you couldn't finance no development. Almost everything that the law says you should do, you didn't have any money to get them started.
Okay. So the goal was not what it is now.
No,
where
it's
we
not.
apply for money and the majority of it goes to recurrent expenditure.
Exactly. That was not
the intent.
the intent.
It was supposed to be for development.
The agreement was direct with Pandey. We would do the development plan and send it down to him, and he would be willing to fit that into the national priorities.
Understood.
And I remember after we finished it, we went to talk with him and so on about what we have in mind. It was all about that. The intent was to liberate Tobago over time from its dependence on Trinidad, where 20 plus years later, really, right?
We're even more dependent, you think?
And where we are now is, in our minds anyway, we are essentially just wholly dependent on Trinidad, and it's worth the while Tobagonians keep an eye on the facts in relation to that, because I don't see how this could be acceptable to Tobagonians. We are asking for 4.1 billion. That's 2.5 times the size of the reported GDP for 2025.
Yes.
That's 2.5 times $1.65 billion
That was listed as Tobago's
of
GDP.
real output.
Yeah.
Now, what does that mean? Well, I did the calculations, and I could tell you that if you look at Trinidad and Tobago, the budget of Trinidad and Tobago is about 35%, meaning the expenditure side, not the revenue side. The revenue side would be a bit lower. But the expenditure side is 35% of the national GDP, national total output.
Yeah.
So Tobago wants to live
Above its means.
with 2.5 times. Now that should raise your antennas. And you have to think as Tobagonians about what that really says about things that we want to do, like autonomy. Now, if you want to be really autonomous, you can't be going down to Port of Spain to finance your autonomy. You've got to be building a viable economy here to finance the things you want to do. So you could choose to do things Trinidad may not support, for example. Now, if you look at the request, it's about 2.4% of the national output, the 4.1 billion, 2.4%. Yes. But the Tobago economy is 1% of the national output.
Yes.
Right? In real terms, it's about 1.1%. In nominal terms, it's even less. So you have to wonder, what are we talking about here? When you go forward with a program request like this, what do you have to do? You have to go along with your targets to escape the dependence. But if you read this document, there are no targets related to how we're going to reduce our dependence on the Trinidad economy. Because if you get that money, you could calculate against the taxable capacity of the Tobago economy and see how much dependence you have. If you are producing 1.65 billion and you tax that at 29% or the 30% tax rate of the country, which is what the central government has to live with, right? That gets you about $478 million. And that's 11% of 4.1 billion. So where the next 89% coming from? Trinidad.
Yes.
You're not coming from Tobago. You only could put up 11%.
Yeah.
So you want all this extra money.
Yeah.
Trinidad, you're saying, give me, and you're going with entitlement in your mind. So Trinidad must give you the 89% as a matter of entitlement. But that's the meaning of warding, isn't it? When the British say we make Tobago a ward of Trinidad, that's warding in the sick economy sense. You understand? Tobago has to worry a little bit about that. And when the budget comes forward, the policymakers must say how we're going to get out of that excessive dependence on Trinidad.
Okay.
But when you look in this document, you don't see it. The same way you don't see an overall growth target. The government said it would tell you its targets.
Yeah.
It would make the targets transparent. And it has a package of priorities. But how are they related to the way the economy has to go? So you report you grew by 1.7% last year.
Yeah.
What's the growth target?
For next year.
And if they try to calculate that, you would see the connection between that and the midterm review.
Okay. Understood.
That connection is straightforward, because the economy in Trinidad and Tobago grew at 0.24%.
Yes.
By the minister's data. You grew by 0.94%, you had inflation of 0.7%, so you have a net 0.2. Right. Now, the thing about that is the government is financing the deficit in the budget with borrowing at about 5.8% in real terms.
Yes.
Right? Interest rate.
Yeah.
So that's a prescription for trouble. You growing at 0.24%,
But you're paying your loans.
your capacity to finance the borrowing is growing at 2.4%. That's what that means. But your obligations, interest obligations, growing at 5.8%. That's a pathway to bankruptcy.
Yes.
Now, in order to avoid that, you have to raise the growth rate of the economy to the 5.8% or higher.
Yes.
So if you wanted to gauge the minimum requirement for Tobago, you would have to start with that 5.8%, and then for Tobago to escape dependency, it has to go faster than that.
Yeah.
And therefore, you have that standard. You could judge all of the things the budget is saying about Tobago's priorities and ask if those things could deliver
the 5.8%. Okay.
When you test it against, first they don't know that in the document, there is no sign of that analysis.
Okay.
But if you test it against that, you could see that most of these things that are mentioned as priorities can deliver that
The
kind of
5.8%.
growth. So that's what forces you to go back to the structural change when the country talks about diversification. You have to go back to that, understand what that has to be, and then see how Tobago fits into that.
Yeah.
That kind of analysis doesn't show up when you
so
go in.
reality is not necessarily about what we feel, but what the numbers are telling us we need to do.
Exactly right.
Okay, and I mean we might not like what the numbers are telling us to do, but
that's what we
that's
have
we're
to
gonna
plan.
Have to do. Okay.
Yeah, and you have to plan that with time frame, So you have to say we're going to do 6% over the next 10 years, and in this first 4 years we're going to do 3% of that, and then go to 5%, and then go to...
So it's not a 5%,
it's not a one shot every year.
It's a
You have to
continual
phase it in.
growth.
Yeah,
Okay.
Because of where you are.
Yeah, okay. One of the things I also wanted to discuss was something, when we look at some of the items listed in the budget and plans, we had discussed the fact of how the THA gets their data to make some of the decisions, well not some, but make the decisions that they are making. Now, we had also discussed that typically data for a budget such as ours would come from the CSO, but we don't believe that that's where that data is coming from. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, let's anchor it on the obligations of the THA and Tobago as half the country.
Yeah.
It's Trinidad and Tobago, not Tobago within Trinidad. So you have obligations. And if you're talking autonomy, more so you have obligations. The economy in Tobago is reported to have grown by 1.7%.
Correct, in the last fiscal.
The first thing that came to my mind when I read the document was, well, is this credible? The national economy grew by 0.24%. You're saying you're growing by 1.7%. Well, the 1.7% is 7 times faster
than the
0.24.
Yeah, than the national economy.
If that is credible, I am not sure it's credible. I'll come into that, but I want to first set up the obligation.
We give them the benefit of the doubt that it is credible.
Well, we should inspect it.
Yes.
But if it is credible, doesn't the THA owe the country an explanation as
So
to
how
you got to grow by 1.7%, while we as a country growing by 0.24%? First, the credibility of the data comes up. In other words, for you to make sense of any attempt to explain that to the country, you have to be able to fit the Tobago data inside the national data. And you can't do that because you don't know how the data was collected. You can't say the data is accurate. The CSO had no say, so it's not official data. The CSO didn't help you to build the estimates, collaborate with you, so it's not official data. Under those two conditions, under the agreements with the UNSD and so on, you need that in order, because the CSO is the only agency that could produce official data.
Okay.
So when the THA is given the assignment to do statistics, it has to enter into some kind of agreement with the CSO to make the data set official. And what that means is the methodologies and so on that you're using
would be consistent with worldwide.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Because the CSO don't just use arbitrary methods, you know, there's the international oversight mechanism provided by the UN Statistics Division, and so on. So when you think about it that way, you have to be worried as a Tobagonian. There are other signs in the document that make you worried, but this is the first thing. You do, what's the methodology? I've been trying for more than a decade now to understand how you collect this data. And up to now, I've never seen it.
In terms of that growth of 1.7%, something else jumped out where the secretary reported that the 1.7% growth came from manufacturing, 23.4%, financial services, 2.9%, and government, which we assume services are 2.6%. The manufacturing part of it, Dr. James. Well, first of all, in terms of how this is said, what is the interpretation of what this means?
Well, here
is the 1.7% made up of manufacturing, financial services, and government services?
Well, let's be scientific. You're a scientist, so you have to read the data any way it could be read. Here's the actual text. The government says the key sectors driving this increase, which is the 1.7%, were manufacturing 23.4%, financial services 2.9%, and government 2.6%.
And you're assuming those are percentages of the 1.7%.
That's one way to read the data. Okay. They could try to say that's not what we meant. The way it's written, an ordinary statistician would read this to say that 23.4% of the 1.7% was contributed by manufacturing.
Yes.
Right. Let's be generous and say the vagueness in the language really means that the government is saying manufacturing grew by 23.4%.
Okay.
Financial services grew by 22.9%. And government grew by 2.6%. But if that is true, now if that is true, the document contains another statement that says there was no structural change in the economy of Tobago.
Yes. Okay.
Right? You cannot have your sectors contributing to the 1.7%.
Growing at
different rates.
Okay.
And you say no structural change. For you to have no structural change, all the sectors have to grow at the same rate.
Okay.
So that's
and that
one.
Is not the case here.
That's not the case here.
Okay.
But that's just one concern. If you read it the other way, the way you were reading it, to say this is the, and remember this is Aisha reading. Aisha is an engineer, so you could read numbers. If you read it to say manufacturing contributed 23.4% of the 1.7%, you run into another sticky problem. Manufacturing is less than 1% of the Tobago economy. That was so just a year ago, right? and manufacturing and agriculture together grew by 2%.
Right, yes.
So what that means based on, no, not grew, contributed 2%. So what that means is agriculture alone contributed 1%, and therefore manufacturing contributed 1% or less. Now, if you give it the 1%, that means manufacturing was $16.5 million worth of output in Tobago, right? So for it to have grown, for it to have contributed 23%, 23.4% of the 1.7%, what that means is you could calculate, well, what's the 1.7% growth amounting to? The figure is $30 million.
Yes.
And you're really saying that the manufacturing sector contributed 23.4% of that 30 million. Well, I calculated the numbers for you. And what that means is manufacturing added $6.9 million in the last year. All right? But $6.9 million added in the last year means that manufacturing grew to get to 16.5 million in 2025. Manufacturing grew by 71% or more.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a manufacturing sector and it could grow by 71%,
it should have been included in the priorities moving forward.
absolutely.
Trinidad included it, but we didn't include it in
And
our priorities.
everybody gonna know.
Okay.
Everybody, you would know. You see it. You would see it all around you in Tobago because you see something happening. You either be in block manufacturing or whatever. You would see it around you. It can't be held as a national secret. But even if it's a national secret and you as government knew that, what do? You go down to Trinidad and say, you can't get no growth in your manufacturing sector. We get 71%. Come invest and let's scale up manufacturing
In Tobago.
Relocate the manufacturing sector in Trinidad to Tobago.
Okay.
And then in that case, you wouldn't have the story in the budget debate that the government is saying, we're going to freeze employment.
Yeah.
Because they're going to have a manufacturing sector you could scale
That
up.
you could move people
And
to.
absolutely.
Okay.
So people looking for jobs, you have a dynamic manufacturing sector. They go over there and find engineering jobs and all these other kinds of jobs, export marketing jobs and so on.
But
Yeah.
Dr. James, are we overlooking something? I mean, I always start with the premise that people are not crazy, right? So are we overlooking something? Is there some area of manufacturing that we're not seeing for them to be able to put that kind of growth in a budget? Or you just think it's an error?
The data doesn't persuade me.
Okay.
Because I don't know the methods.
Method, okay.
But if it is true, there are questions for the secretary and the chief secretary to answer, which
Okay.
is, well, what is it we're producing?
What it is we're
You have to
producing.
tell us. Who
Where-
are the manufacturers?
yes,
Who
where
are
is
the
it-
entrepreneurs?
Where is it being sold?
Where are you selling the
Are you
output?
collecting
Is it-
taxes on it?
Is it selling only in Tobago or are you selling it to Trinidad?
Okay.
I mean, you produce 6.9 million of manufacturing output in this kind of stagnant economy we have going on here in Tobago. You're not going to sell it here. And even if you sold it here, policy could encourage you to sell it abroad, sell it in the Caribbean, sell it to the
elsewhere.
Americans
Yeah,
and so on.
correct.
There is no reason to keep it a national secret. You've got to report on it properly.
Yeah.
And it would be a flagship part of my report if my economy was performing this way.
Okay.
The other thing about that is understanding what you're talking about with autonomy. What you're going to do? You're going to run down Trinidad and find some of the private sector investors
they could come
and
and
say,
invest.
come, because
Okay.
the THA is already too big.
Yeah.
You understand? You
Yeah.
can't be complaining that you're going to hold down employment in the THA and you have a star industry like this
Manufacturing.
and you're now selling it to the world to get foreign investment to come in
Okay.
to make it grow.
So then let's look at it, because I don't think we've ever discussed it. Is manufacturing in Tobago a potential market for development of Tobago?
A
And if so,
potential industry.
Yeah, in potential industry. And what? What?
You ask me?
Yes, I'm
What-
asking you.
You have to ask me,
Well,
what does the
finance-
national data say?
What does the national
That's
data
the question.
say? Actually, I think we discussed this before. No, go ahead.
Well, let me give you the
Yes.
national data because I've been calculating it in the last couple of months.
Okay.
The national data says, well, let me tell you the whole story since we are all Tobagonians. There is one of Tobago's most competent economists is Shelton Nichols, who grew up just the road up the back up here. And when I did a lot of the work I did in the last year, I sent the data to him, the results to him, for him to study. And he said to me, get manufacturing as one class of industries that you're testing.
Okay.
I had not tested manufacturing.
Okay.
So I did that, right? If you're chief econometrist and tell you do it, you do it. So I did that, and the results come back exactly the opposite of what he expected.
Which is?
Manufacturing, light manufacturing, of the kind you would be talking about here.
Light?
Light manufacturing, you know, foods and beverages, soap, those kinds of things. You're not talking cars and trucks and heavy-duty airplanes.
Yeah, correct.
Right. That kind of manufacturing industry in Trinidad and Tobago's data generates incomes 16% below industries that are not light manufacturing. 16.5% below.
And that's light manufacturing.
Yeah. Well, you have no other kind of manufacturing in the country.
Might be able to do some planes.
Engineers can say those things.
So 16% below.
Below.
What is?
What that means is it's part of the wage suppression component.
Yeah.
And therefore, if you want to develop the economy, that's not the direction.
That's not the direction we should go.
Because when you compare it with medicine and law and so on, their incomes are 18, 17% above the rest, those who are not in there. So it's those that you have to look at for the advantages. Those are the industries you have to convert into,
actual industries.
Legal services built into financial services. Built into...
Financial services was listed too, which I was happy to see, but it was so low. The 2.9% of the 1.7%.
Yeah, but that's as a contributor, but that is not an exporter. That is a domestic supply.
Domestic, yeah.
And it comes
what, you're saying the 2.9 is a domestic supply?
These are domestic industries.
Okay. Because I remember we had discussed that we could export financial services
if we wanted
to.
The Bahamas does it. That's a smaller economy.
Yeah,
was a smaller economy.
To be able to generate revenue.
But the important point is when you check, if you want to answer the question about light manufacturing, you have to put it in the context of what the data says. And the data doesn't tell you that light manufacturing is the way to
That
go.
was surprising. And if the economists thought it was surprising, because I thought light manufacturing, especially for a small island developing state like ours, would work if done on a good scale.
Well, that's the kind of guesswork that has been going on
you call it guesswork.
planning around the region.
We just feel what could work.
We just Arthur Lewis told us in 1950 that light manufacturing brings advantages. And he provided analytical justification for it, not empirical, analytical justification in the 54 paper, and that won him a Nobel Prize. So I knew Lewis well. Lewis was a friend of mine. And when you run the claim against the evidence we have today, he didn't have the evidence, but you have the evidence now. William Demas, one of our great economists with Tobago heritage, said the same thing. He agreed with Lewis. CARICOM is built on the assumption that light manufacturing is
good
a source
for
of advantage.
For small islands.
Yeah, and there are two economists from Ghana, Havelock Brewster and Clive Thomas, who built a whole analytical justification underlying Demas's observations that because you're small, you cannot take advantage of what Lewis was saying you should. So that's where the market enlargement focus of CARICOM came from. But when you look at the evidence, that's
the empirical evidence, it doesn't work.
If you look at the Trinidad and Tobago data, we're now trying to look at the Jamaica data, and I would bet my dollar that is the same thing you're going to get.
Okay.
So when you really think about it, if you Tobago come in last, and you have the evidence from the national data set that that's not the direction in which to go.
It don't make sense
Yeah,
trying.
it doesn't mean you shouldn't do manufacturing.
Well, individuals would do manufacturing, but it shouldn't be a part of your policy directive.
If you want to develop the economy and achieve the 5.8% growth and
that
stuff
you
like
need.
that,
Okay.
there are other priorities built on the tourism platform.
Okay.
We have fantastic tourism capacity, but we're using it just to invite people to come to the beach.
To Lime.
There are other things you could sell to people coming into your country. And we have to look at those, and the data of the country tell you what those other
Those
things are.
items
That's
are.
another conversation.
Okay.
But that
All right.
tells you how, when you really take a hard look at these budgets that are being put forward by the central government and by Tobago, there's just a lot of hand waving and guesswork going on. And none of it is root. If I were budgeting for Tobago, the number one thing I would do is recognize that I do not have reliable data here to tell me how the economy works. I would analyze the national data set,
Yeah.
work out the way the country has to go.
Yeah.
Say I am half of the country, so
So we
I
have-
will fit into that and place myself
There.
in a strategic position in that.
And
when
then
you
tweak
take-
as you go.
Then tweak as you go. And when you
Okay.
take that view, you're not going to get the answers that are in this document.
All right. On that note, we'll take a break and come back. Stay tuned.
MI4 Security Services Company is the most advanced security service in Tobago. Ask about our cash and transit service. It's safe, risk-free, reliable, and timely. We provide safe banking delivery for all business types and sizes with highly trained staff, 24/7 monitoring, coordinated emergency response, and a well-maintained fleet of armored vehicles. Contact us at 660-7723 or visit our website at www.mi4securitytt.com to sign up today.
Have you visited Tobago Channel 5's Facebook or Instagram pages lately? Well, check them out now for all the interviews and up-to-date news. Remember to like, share and follow for Tobago news and current affairs information at your fingertips.
welcome back. Thank you for staying with us as I discuss with Dr. Vanus James, economist, the THA Fiscal Package 2027, along with its link to the midterm review that just went. So, and this is our final segment, so stick with us. We have a little, it continues to be interesting. So Dr. James, one of the things we spoke about was the 5.8% growth rate that growth rate that is required
at the national level.
At the national level to pretty much keep the country out of bankruptcy. And that's from a perspective of we are borrowing at one particular number.
We're borrowing at 5.8%.
We were borrowing at 5.8.
Real interest rates.
Real interest rates, but
we're growing at 2.24%.
Correct.
That can't work.
You're right. So we have to target the highest rate in order to keep us afloat.
You have to target the 5.8 at the country level.
Correct.
Or more.
Right.
And if Tobago is to get out of the dependence on Trinidad,
we
it has
as
to
well
go faster
than the 5.8. Yes.
Tobago has to go faster than Trinidad. So when you combine those, you could see Tobago's target growth rate has to be above the 5.8%.
Okay. The programs included in the budget, can those programs take us to the 5.8 and above?
Well, that's the question the society has to ask the government.
Okay.
If this is the challenge we face, are your programs able to deliver this growth rate? It's striking that the government has said nothing about the target growth rates, and neither the midterm nor the THA has said anything about that. Right now, remember the fundamental way in which you must build a plan and build a budget is to set the growth rate and then build down from there. But you have none of that, although the government has promised it would publish its targets. So it has built the budget, maybe it has those targets in the back of its head.
But it hasn't made them public.
Hasn't made them public. And usually the reason governments don't make good targets public is the public gets something to hold them to.
Right, and they don't want to be held.
They don't want to be held accountable.
Yeah.
But beyond that, though, in the context of Tobago, there are other questions. Because of the dominance of the state, you have to ask, even if you have to grow at 5.8 or more, what's the role of the private sector? These budgets are budgets for what government will do.
Yeah,
government don't build economy. The private sector has to be the linchpin of the development of the economy. And this document is void of any real clarity as to how the private sector will become part of the engine of development. So that then means when you're targeting the growth rate, you have to say what share of that growth will be achieved by the private sector as against by government.
Yeah.
So if government growing at 2.6% and that ain't getting you where you want to go, you need the private sector to be growing at 10%, something like that.
Yeah.
That's the kind of discussion you have to have.
Okay.
None of that shows up here. The other thing, though, that you have to keep in mind is that citizens have to judge whether your programs, right, can meet the target. You have to answer as government, but citizens have to judge. My job as an economist is to give the citizens information on which to judge. And there are a couple of things that I think we ought to draw to the citizens' attention. One of them is that when you look at these two documents, with THA banking on the economy in Trinidad, and the government in Trinidad banking on oil and gas, that essentially says THA also banking on oil and gas to get money to spend.
Correct.
Oil and gas is the source of all our troubles. It give you money to waste, but it ain't caused no development over the last 70 years. So.
And why you say money to waste? Money to live. That is what they would consider
you too young to remember when Eric Williams said money is no problem.
Money is no problem.
But what else is the problem then?
Oh,
that what else is the problem is what we have to sort out.
Okay.
So otherwise your money becomes money that passed through your system like salts. As Michael Manley described the Trinidad Tobago petrodollars.
Yeah.
You have to be careful, in other words, not to be mesmerized by oil and gas.
Yeah.
So that's one thing citizens must keep in mind.
So you have to look at other forms of revenue.
Yeah. Secondly, when you look at agriculture and tourism, right, 80% in the case of tourism, 79%. Agriculture is about 89%
yeah.
of the workers in those industries are unskilled workers.
Yep. Lower wages.
Their wages are somewhere about 34% or more below average wages in the country, below the wages of workers who don't work in agriculture.
Yes.
Right? So you're not going to tell me that you'll get the growth you need from agriculture and even tourism. Jamaica is a good reason for you to be suspicious of tourism anyway. They've been getting 2%, 0.5%, 1%, no percent growth with 6 million tourists, with Ritz-Carlton and the Marriotts and all of them.
And people talk about it, that
splurging
Jamaica
all over
so
Jamaica.
But I don't think the public is not aware of the numbers. They see everybody going to Jamaica and having a good time, and Jamaica is getting 60 and 100,000 tourists a year.
6 million.
6 million, sorry, 6 million tourists a year, but they don't. Nobody tells them the numbers.
Well, as I pointed out to you before, you could invest in something and say you'll cause development, and for 40 years, Jamaica going down this road and it ain't causing no development. They're at $6,000 US per person. Tobago with zero development is at 3,009 in that zone. Okay. So you have to be careful when you're talking about the development of a Caribbean economy, because not everything you dream of makes sense. You have to study the data properly and work out what should be done. So agriculture and tourism are not the way to go. Now, I'm not passing them out on tourism because it's an important platform. Yeah. And St. Kitts, Nevis, and the Bahamas prove to you what you could do with it. They export these high-powered services on the tourism platform. In the case of Bahamas, when you go there to buy financial services, high-powered income, right? Legal services, services to package financial investments, accounting services, all those things. These are high-powered, high-income services. When you go to the Bahamas, you are exporting high-level tertiary education. So you're not passing them out on tourism, but you want to change the type of tourism you're doing. So the case here is that it's not tourism. And of course, we've made the point
not the tourism that we have.
Well, you're right, it's an industrialized tourism, as I like to say. And then, of course, the same with the light manufacturers. So that's not the direction in which you want to go. Now, I wanted to just draw your attention back to the fact that the creative industries are a good bet. No argument over them, except how you do them. Okay. If you do them as events, you're in trouble, as you pointed out. The THA's document says what they will try to do is focus on those industries, and their flagship example is what long ago we used to call PAN in schools. This THA, it must be a set of people who, so young, they don't remember when we had those debates back in the 1970s. And when we looked at the data, and when you look at the data today, you get the same result. It's not PAN in schools you need. Lloyd Best put it the other way. It's schools in PAN. Okay. And the real answer is that you have to turn PAN into schools. Okay. So it's PAN as schools, not PAN in schools.
But you need to define that for the public.
Yes, you have to take every PAN side and turn it into a school of music with all the other paraphernalia for school. So you're doing O-levels, but your main specialization in those. And you have to put investment behind them. You can't leave them without place to operate from, without a pool. So government becomes an agency that is buying education services from them, but at the same time you're encouraging them to get students from the rest of the world to come here. So instead of having Devon Stewart in Trinidad helping out renegades,
you could be teaching in Tobago.
A professor, and everybody go want to come to go to your class. That sort of stuff. And then you enter into a deal with other institutions around the world to twin with this side or that side or the other side.
Yeah.
because they are able to
Yeah.
bring their students from the rest of the world.
Yes.
So you could have a twinning with Berkeley
Yeah.
out of Boston. And what the consequence of that would be is that you would have a certain branding alongside the technical quality. So it wouldn't be branding in the way Marriott branding your hotel, because you're anchoring the thing on real substantive quality.
Okay.
Right? That sort of stuff is what you have to be thinking about, turning the span sides into real
Schools.
high-level schools. That's how they will get year-long income, right? That's how they will bring higher standards to the carnival events, panoramas, and all those kinds of things. And all through the year, they'll be part of the process of producing the extra event outputs, the films and the video games and so on. You'll highlight the quality inside those extra things so that the end result is they have a multidimensional income source.
Okay.
You know, that sort of stuff is what you have to think about.
Okay. All right. Dr. James, before we close off, we wanted to touch that topic that everybody is talking about these days, the use of AI, and the use of AI in terms of government, but also the use of AI in terms of development of Trinidad and Tobago, and by extension Tobago. How do you see it fitting in?
And it's one of the things about the practice of economics is you always have to be updating what you're thinking about, because the world is so dynamic. And AI is evidence of that. It's maybe the most disruptive technology the world has ever seen.
For a while, correct?
And we need to understand it as part of our understanding, not just of development, but of the way we do everything. The key to it is that we must understand what it is. AI is really, especially in the modern forms, it's really scientific analysis on steroids, meaning the steroids being hardware, software, you know, backpropagation, all of those kinds of technologies, high-level mathematics, and so on. Now, what it amounts to is the real AI side of the conversation is really a set of programming devices to take symbolic logic, what we call mathematical logic, which I studied in graduate school, and convert anything, whether it's a book or just a batch of unstructured data, they turn those into mathematical symbols and process them. That's the deductive part. The processing is by logical rules. So what you really have here is what we normally think of in scientific analysis as logical reasoning and rationalist thinking. You want to prove so to be true by deduction.
Correct.
The other face of science, so you could see they're using the power of the computer to do that. Where you and I grew up doing it with the head.
With the head.
They're also able to build agents, meaning the agentic AI, for example, literally could create a digital worker to do that kind of work, right? With millions and millions of variables involved. You can't manage that as any individual. The other phase, though, is the other side of what science is, which is observation and induction. So you get data from experiments or whatever else, from life, observational data, and you extract inferences from the data as to the truth of claims, statements. So they become premises in the deductive process. Machine learning is what we use to do that. And you combine those two things and you get science, but science on steroids. I mean, the scale. So if you are, and I may point to you just last week, the IDB put on a training program for Trinidad and Tobago people. exposing them to a piece of software, open source software, that would allow you as a worker to go to work and use AI
Yeah.
in your job. So you're training people to use AI.
Yeah.
So it's like you don't have to be an engineer to drive a car. You just understand how to drive the car.
Correct. Yeah.
But if you're talking development, you can't approach it that way, because you've got to know what's behind the hood.
Correct.
If your car breaks down on the road,
Yes.
you've got to have a
AI
mechanic.
is not going to help you.
AI, you've got to use the AI underpinnings, the symbolic logic, the mathematical logic, the high-level statistics, causal analysis. That's the heart of science.
Yeah.
And if you want to talk development, you have to really be talking about producing knowledge the same way AI does.
Yeah.
Now, there are three big engine sets of knowledge producers nowadays. Google and them with Gemini in the AI world.
Yeah.
OpenAI and ChatGPT
GPT.
down that road. And then the master of all of them is this Anthropic company with Claude.
Yeah.
When you take those, what you see them doing is producing new knowledge. These are the same tools that you're using to discover new vaccines. And we can't just stay out and watch and
let
wait.
it happen.
So when you have a problem, you just Google it.
Yeah.
You can't operate that way.
We have to try and be involved.
You have to be involved in the knowledge production.
Yep.
And the records we have tell you that the ability to produce knowledge, which was always what we were trying to do with our system, right? That ability is the key to your development.
Okay.
So you can't just say, we're going to go down the road and clean up the curriculum and so on in that abstract way without knowing that this is at the center.
The time for that has passed.
When you read the document, you could see no reference to these things. It's almost as though they're not aware. Although I'm not bold enough to say they're not aware, I would say perhaps there's just a lack of interest, maybe a lack of appropriate information to be interested.
Yeah.
But if you don't sort that out and fix the learning function in Tobago, we will be a backwater forever.
Yeah. And then eventually it will just come and land on top of us. It
And
would be
remember-
given to us and we would not have been a part of how it was
Remember
developed.
what happened to us for the last 120 something years? We've been behind the curve for all that time. Well, if you think you spend 125 years in purgatory, when AI
Fully
in the next 5 years becomes as dominant as it is going to become, you're going to be talking 1,000 years. To avoid that, you have to get into knowledge production with the modern technologies.
Yeah.
And therefore, you have to change the way you run the school systems. You went to school here, I went to school here. You never knew about symbolic logic and mathematical logic, right? You're going to now have to be teaching children about those things and all the other elements that go along.
I mean,
Exactly.
we knew about it in university when we were doing programming
Exactly,
and all that.
I
Now the
first
kids need
encountered
to
it in
learn.
university.
Yes, now the
Exactly.
kids need to learn it earlier
Foundational.
than we learned it.
Yeah,
Yep.
and children, of course, turn everything into intuition. So
Correct.
they'll be masters of it by the time I am gone.
Correct.
So we have to change what we are thinking about. And when we say skill, it's no longer work in that old-fashioned sense.
Yeah.
It's high-powered learning on steroids that you then translate into new ways of doing
Getting
things, and you go
done
practice
and
that.
making money, well,
Exactly.
generating revenue. Let's put
Exactly.
it like that.
And that will force you to think about skill
Yeah.
different to
Yeah.
plumbing and masonry.
Yeah.
Skill.
And I mean, we're not talking about individuals. We're talking about how would governments now use that technology to find new ways of generating revenue.
And how the economy, not just
the
governments,
economy?
is
Okay.
the private sector has to
Private
be the
sector as
biggest,
well,
biggest
correct.
part of it,
Yes,
really.
they are.
And the
Significant part
communities.
of it.
The
Communities
data we
as
have
well.
from Tobago is that the communities would be willing to become entrepreneurial centers themselves. You
How
can't
do
just-
they use the AI technology?
How
to
do,
be able to
exactly,
do it?
how
Okay.
do they do all of these things?
Maybe that is what we need to be pushing.
That whole story had better become, after the reform of government, the single most important challenge for Tobago is to upgrade rapidly its learning speed.
Okay.
So when you have problems, you solve them with your data and the data from the world and sell the products to the world.
Okay. Yeah.
Because
Usually we wait for the solution
and
to
then,
come to us.
and then buy the product.
Yeah.
you see. So that's the landscape of interpretation
Okay.
of the budget. You could see it raises completely different issues than 4.1 million.
Yeah. And then also government policy to be put in place early as the technology comes in. Because you know, we as Trinidad and Tobagonians, we like to find innovative ways to use technology that somehow sometimes does not benefit. So government policy has to be critical as well.
Well, there's something that the country has to be warned about if you remain on the side of just buying the technologies. You have to get involved in what we call intra-industry trade. So you have to be making things with the technology and selling it just the same way as you're buying it.
Okay.
Right? If the intention is to simply import, you're just going to skyrocket your import bill with nothing to export.
Yeah.
And you turn the whole country into a Tobago. We import everything and we export nothing. The whole country could quickly become like that, but for oil and gas. If you're not careful, because by the time they finish innovating with light manufacturing all around the rest of the world,
And it ain't work.
using AI, you're not into that game,
Yeah.
you're dead in the water.
All right, Dr. James, it was enlightening as usual. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, thank you, the public, for joining us on this discussion on fiscal package 2027, which was presented by the THA Finance Secretary. Thank you for joining us. Do stay tuned for other episodes. Have a good evening.